Every perfect marriage has its cracks. Mine just happened to shatter in front of an audience. My name is Declan Mitchell. For 15 years, I've been married to Lorraine, brilliant, ambitious Lorraine, who built her marketing firm from a spare bedroom into one of Boston's premier agencies. From the outside, we were the couple everyone envied. Successful careers, a beautiful colonial in Brookline, vacation photos from exotic locations that made our friends seethe with jealousy. We had it all figured out, or so I thought. I sell luxury real estate. I'm good at reading people, at sensing when something is off. It's how I know when a client is serious about a multi-million-dollar brownstone or just wasting my time. My entire career is built on perception, on understanding the subtle shifts in tone and body language that betray a person's true intentions. But somehow, I missed the signs in my own home. The distance grew so gradually, so insidiously, that I barely noticed it happening. Lorraine started working later, the long hours bleeding into weekends. Business trips became more frequent, often popping up with little notice for client emergencies. The dinners I cooked would sit on the warming rack, untouched. Our shared calendar, once filled with galas and friends' parties, became a testament to her absence. Her kisses, which once held the promise of a shared future, became perfunctory, a brief, dry press of lips before she was already turning away, her mind clearly elsewhere. Our conversations, which used to wander through dreams and fears, were reduced to logistics. Who's picking up the dry cleaning? Did you RSVP to the Henderson's gala? When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me the highlights reel, the polished, sanitized version she probably shared with her assistant. Nothing real, nothing vulnerable. It's just work stress, Dec, she'd say, waving a dismissive hand, her gaze already fixed on her phone. This new client is demanding, you know how at Island, and I believed her. I believed her because the alternative was a chasm I was terrified to look into. I believed her because our life was a masterpiece of design, and I couldn't imagine that its foundation was rotting away beneath our feet. Believing her was easier. It was self-preservation. Until one night in March. I couldn't sleep, a vague anxiety coiling like a cold snake in my stomach. I went to the bathroom for a glass of water and saw her phone glowing on the cool marble counter. She left it unlocked, something she never, ever did. For a long moment I stood there, a war raging within me. Respect her privacy. Walk away. You're being paranoid. Then I thought about all the small changes, the subtle shifts I had subconsciously logged. How she'd changed the passcode last month without telling me. How she always kept her phone face down on the table, a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. How she'd started stepping out of the room to take calls, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A single text preview was visible on the screen. The name was one I recognized instantly, Griffin Vance, her biggest client. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. My stomach dropped. The sensation of falling from a great height, the air rushing from my lungs. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone, its weight feeling immense. Catastrophic. What I found wasn't business correspondence. It was an intimate chronicle of betrayal spanning months. Plans for meetups in hotel bars, inside jokes that I wasn't privy to, and complaints about me, about us, about our stagnant relationship that she had never once voiced to my face. Declan's a good man, she'd written in one message, the words a clinical, detached assessment that gutted me. But we're just going through the motions now. With you, I feel alive again. Alive. The word was a knife twisting in my heart. While she was feeling alive with him, I was at home, watering the plants in the life we had supposedly built together, wondering why my wife seemed so tired, so distant. I scrolled back, a digital archaeologist, digging through the ruins of my marriage. Back to December. I found the first flirtatious exchanges, the shift from professional courtesy to something more. 4 months. This had been happening for 4 months of my life. A secret history written in glowing text while I was living in blissful, willful ignorance. I didn't confront her that night. The initial shock and pain didn't erupt into rage. Instead, something cold and calculating took its place, a part of myself I didn't recognize. I felt a strange, chilling clarity. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it and returned to our bed. I lay beside her for hours, her breathing even and deep, while my world splintered in the silent darkness. I studied the familiar patterns of moonlight on the ceiling, but they now seemed menacing and foreign. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about my entire life, my identity as a husband, being a carefully constructed lie, and I wasn't going to let it be a private tragedy. I wanted everyone, especially the people who admired our perfect life, to see the truth. I didn't sleep. I planned. The next morning, Lorraine kissed me goodbye, as if the world hadn't ended hours before. "Board meeting tonight," she said, adjusting the lapels of her sharp, impossibly white blazer. "Don't wait up." I nodded, forcing a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. My face ached with the effort. "No problem. Good luck with the presentation." Oh. The moment the front door clicked shut, the performance ended. The mask dropped. I walked to the phone, my movements precise and deliberate, and called my office. I feigned a sudden illness, my voice convincingly raspy, the first sick day I'd taken in 3 years. My boss was so surprised, he barely questioned it. Then I opened my laptop, the soft glow of the screen illuminating my new singular purpose. My investigation began. Griffin Vance wasn't just any client. He was the sun in Lorraine's professional solar system. As the VP of marketing at Nexus Technologies, he represented her biggest account, a contract worth millions in annual billings that had catapulted her firm into the big leagues. I found him on LinkedIn. Harvard MBA, divorced 2 years ago, recently relocated to Boston from Chicago. His profile picture showed a man with perfectly coiffed salt and pepper hair and the kind of easy, unearned confidence that comes from old money and a lifetime of things going his way. I dove deeper, falling down a rabbit hole of social media, corporate press releases, and charity event photos. And there they were. In picture after picture, he and Lorraine, standing just a little too close, a little too familiar. In one image from a gala last month, his hand rested possessively on the small of her back, a gesture of ownership disguised as casual affection. I remembered that night with a sickening jolt. She'd come home well after midnight, flushed and vibrant, claiming the event ran long. She had slept in the guest room because she didn't want to wake me. The lie was so simple, so elegant. By the afternoon, I had meticulously mapped out their entire affair. The business meetings that ran suspiciously late into the evening, the weekend emergency client situations that always seemed to involve a quiet, expensive restaurant, the marketing conference in New York that just so happened to coincide with his own business trip there. The patterns were undeniable. I even found the hotel where they met most frequently, the Liberty downtown, a place known for its discreet luxury. A quick search confirmed my suspicion. Lorraine's company had an ongoing corporate rate there for visiting clients. How convenient, how utterly, breathtakingly deceitful. The meticulous planning, the sheer audacity of it, was both sickening and, in a strange, twisted way, impressive. My anger was a living thing now, a physical presence coiling and tightening in my chest. It wasn't a hot, explosive rage. It was a cold, dense fury, demanding an outlet, a stage. It demanded a reckoning. That evening, I called my oldest friend Silas. He was the head chef at Aria, a restaurant so exclusive you had to book months in advance. We'd known each other since we were kids who dreamed of escaping our working-class neighborhood. He'd made it with his culinary genius. I'd made it by selling pieces of the city to the wealthy. "Silas, it's Declan. I need a table for 2 next Friday." I paused, taking a steadying breath. "And I need something else. A favor you're going to think is crazy." 1. After I explained my situation and my chillingly detailed plan, there was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the frantic energy of his kitchen fade into the background as he processed what I'd said. Finally, he sighed, a sound heavy with concern. "You sure about this, Deck? This is biblical. There's no coming back from something like this." "I'm sure," I said, my voice as hard and unyielding as granite. "She didn't worry about coming back from what she did." Oh. For the next week, I played the role of the oblivious husband to perfection. I was a ghost in my own home, a phantom of the man I used to be. I didn't ask questions when Lorraine came home late, smelling faintly of a wine we didn't keep in the house. I didn't comment when she took calls in another room, her voice a low, intimate murmur. I was the picture of the distracted, comfortable spouse who had long since stopped paying attention. She saw what she wanted to see. Meanwhile, I was setting the stage, moving my pawns into place with a precision that would have made Lorraine proud. First, I called her loyal assistant, Linda, under the pretense of planning a lavish surprise for Lorraine's upcoming birthday. Linda had always liked me, and after some gentle prodding and feigned enthusiasm, she confirmed what I already suspected. There was no board meeting that fateful night. Furthermore, Lorraine had blocked off her calendar with vague client meetings 3 afternoons a week for the past several months. The timeline matched perfectly. Next, I contacted the other partners at Lorraine's firm, including her senior partner, the stoic and respected Alastair Finch. I invited them to join us for a celebratory dinner at Aria. I spun a convincing tale about Lorraine landing a major new account, a secret victory I wanted to help her announce in style. They were thrilled, especially since business had been slower than usual lately. Their eagerness was palpable. Then, with ice in my veins, I reached out to Griffin's assistant, posing as someone from Lorraine's office. I said, "Mr. Vance was cordially invited to join Lorraine and the agency partners for an intimate dinner on Friday to discuss expanding their working relationship into a long-term strategic alliance." The assistant, impressed by the venue and the pretense, confirmed his attendance without a moment's hesitation. The final piece was the most crucial, the one that would elevate my plan from accusation to undeniable fact. I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by a lawyer I trusted. It cost me $5,000, but it would be worth every penny. By Friday morning, I had a complete dossier of their affair, neatly organized in a sleek black folder, time-stamped photos of them entering the Liberty, looking like any other couple on a romantic getaway, short video clips of them dining intimately at a secluded corner table, copies of hotel receipts paid for by her company. I also had a second, slimmer folder containing financial records, a damning paper trail showing how Lorraine had been siphoning company resources to fund her trysts, charging hotel rooms as client accommodations, billing their romantic dinners as business meetings, even using the company car, service for a weekend getaway to a Vermont inn. As I knotted my tie that evening, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back was a stranger. The grief and confusion had been burned away, leaving behind a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. It was about exposing a lie that had infected every part of my life, my marriage, and her business. It was about justice. Aria was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a symphony of clinking glasses, muted conversations, and the soft glow of candlelight. The air itself seemed to hum with wealth and power. Silas had arranged everything perfectly. A large private dining room, shielded from the main floor by heavy velvet curtains, with a long mahogany table set for 8. Lorraine froze the moment we stepped inside, her hand tightening on my arm. She saw her business partners Alastair, Catherine, and Ben already seated, champagne flutes in hand. Her professional smile, usually so effortless, became strained, brittle. "Declan, what is this?" she whispered, her voice a tight coil of suspicion. "Surprise," I said, my own smile feeling terrifyingly genuine for the first time in weeks. I leaned in, my voice a conspiratorial murmur for her ears only. "You've been working so hard. I thought you deserved to celebrate your success with the people who appreciate you most." Before she could respond, her senior partner, the ever-dignified Alastair, stood to greet us, his face beaming. "Declan, this is quite the gesture. Lorraine, congratulations on the new account. Your husband has been singing your praises." Lorraine played along brilliantly, the momentary confusion behind her eyes vanishing as she slipped into her polished corporate persona. She was a professional, after all. She could sell anything, including the lie that she knew what was going on. She accepted their congratulations with a practiced humility that made my stomach turn. "We're just waiting for one more guest," I announced as we took our seats at opposite ends of the long table. I was the host, the conductor of this orchestra of destruction. Lorraine gave me a sharp, questioning look from across the expanse of white linen and gleaming silver. "Who else is coming?" I just smiled, a serene, chilling expression I didn't recognize as my own, and poured her a glass of champagne. "Drink up, darling. Tonight is special." 10 minutes later, the curtain to the room was pulled back, and Griffin Vance walked in. He stopped short when he saw the assembled group, his confident, easygoing demeanor faltering like a flickering light bulb. His eyes darted around the table before landing on Lorraine, whose face had gone completely pale, a stark, sickly white against the crimson of her dress. "Mr. Vance," I stood, my movements fluid and deliberate, extending a hand as if he were an honored guest. "Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you could make it. Please have a seat right here." I indicated the empty chair directly across from Lorraine. The seating was intentional, forcing them into each other's line of sight, a tableau of guilt for all to witness. The tension was exquisite, a palpable thing that sucked the air out of the room. Neither of them knew exactly what was happening, but both sensed that the ground was about to open up beneath them. Her partner simply looked confused. Once everyone was seated, a nervous silence settling over the table, I stood again and raised my glass. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, my voice carrying easily through the suddenly quiet room. "To partnerships, of all kinds, the ones that build businesses and the ones that build lives. To trust, loyalty, and transparency, the cornerstones of any successful endeavor." Lorraine was staring at me now, her eyes wide, pleading, silently begging me to stop whatever this was. I held her gaze for a moment before turning to the rest of the table, ignoring her silent appeal as if it were a whisper in the wind. "Some of you might be wondering why I've gathered you all here tonight," I continued, my tone conversational, relaxed. "Lorraine told me she had a business dinner, and I thought, what better way to support my brilliant wife than to invite her closest colleagues to celebrate with us?" I paused, letting the statement hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Then I reached for the sleek black folder and placed it firmly on the table with a soft, definitive thud. "In the spirit of transparency, I've prepared some materials I think you'll all find interesting." With the calm precision of a dealer at a high-stakes poker game, I began distributing copies to everyone at the table except Lorraine and Griffin. Copies of hotel receipts from the Liberty, timestamped photos of them entering the hotel, laughing, screenshots of their intimate text messages. The room grew deathly quiet as the rustle of paper was replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding on the faces of her partners. Alistair's face, in particular, hardened into a mask of cold fury. "For the past 4 months," I said, my voice steady and even, devoid of the emotion that had been churning inside me for weeks, "my wife has been having an affair with Mr. Vance. That alone would be a personal matter, a tragedy to be handled behind closed doors. But when company resources are being misappropriated to fund these rendezvous, I believe it becomes a matter of professional concern as well." I opened the second folder. "Here," I said, sliding the documents toward Alistair, "you will find evidence that Lorraine has been charging personal expenses related to this affair directly to the company. Hotel rooms listed as client accommodations, romantic dinners billed as business meetings, even weekend trips, all paid for by the Nexus Technologies retainer or the agency's general expense accounts. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was stealing from all of you." Alistair looked up from the documents, his face ashen. He looked at the woman he had mentored for a decade. "Lorraine, is this true?" Lorraine was completely still, a statue carved from ice. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her champagne glass. Griffin was staring intently at the wood grain of the table, as if it held the secrets to the universe, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Declan," Lorraine finally said, her voice a raw, broken whisper, "we should discuss this privately." "Why?" I asked, the question sharp as a shard of glass. "You didn't feel the need for privacy when you were discussing our marriage with Griffin. In fact, you were quite descriptive. Let me read you a few highlights." I pulled out my phone, the screen a beacon of her betrayal, and began to recite her own words. "Declan has no idea how dead I feel inside when I'm with him. Or this one, my personal favorite. Sometimes I look at the life we've built and wonder if any of it was worth it." The room was so silent you could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. "Stop," Griffin finally said, his voice strained, a pathetic attempt to reclaim some shred of decorum. "This isn't appropriate." I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that surprised even me. It was the sound of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Not appropriate? You've been sleeping with my wife for 4 months. You've been letting her company foot the bill for your affair, and you want to lecture me about what's appropriate?" I turned my attention back to Lorraine's shell-shocked partners. "I am truly sorry to involve you all in this mess, but Lorraine has betrayed more than just me. She has betrayed your trust. She has been stealing from the company you all built together." Alistair cleared his throat, his authority returning like a king, reclaiming his throne. "I think we should continue this discussion another time. Lorraine, we will need to meet first thing Monday morning. Do not come into the office before then." Lorraine didn't respond. She was staring at me, her expression a maelstrom of pure fury and utter disbelief. The victim had become the accused, and she had no defense. I stood up, my task complete. "Enjoy your dinner. It's already been paid for." Not by the company this time, but by me. Consider it my parting gift. I tossed my napkin onto the table, a final, definitive gesture. Lorraine, I've moved your things to the guest room. My lawyer will be in contact with you on Monday. As I walked out, I heard her call my name, a desperate, broken sound that echoed in the silent room. I didn't turn back. In the cool evening air outside, I finally took a deep, shuddering breath. It was done. The truth was out. The perfect life we had built was now a pile of smoldering ruins. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face the hollow echo of our house, the ghost of our shared life haunting every room. The thought of sleeping in the same building as her, even in separate rooms, was unbearable. Instead, I drove north, the city lights of Boston shrinking in my rearview mirror like a life I was leaving behind. I drove to our beach house in Cape Cod, a place I hadn't visited in months, because Lorraine had claimed she needed it as a creative retreat for work. Now, I wondered with a sickening certainty if she'd brought Griffin there, tainting even this sanctuary with their lies. The 2-hour drive gave me time to process what I had just done. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving a strange, hollow relief in its wake. Had I gone too far? Had the public execution been unnecessarily cruel? Maybe. But I felt no regret. It was like lancing a boil that had been festering for months, painful, messy, but absolutely necessary to start the healing. I let myself into the quiet house, poured a generous whiskey, and sat on the deck, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore. It was a clean, timeless sound that washed over the chaos in my mind. My phone buzzed incessantly on the table beside me, a barrage of messages from Lorraine, from her partners, even one from Griffin. I ignored them all. Instead, I called the one person I knew would understand, or at least wouldn't judge. My older brother, Rowan, who lived 3,000 miles away in Seattle. Despite the time difference, he answered immediately. "Deck, everything okay? It's late there." And, "Not really," I said, my voice rough. And then I told him everything. The discovery, the investigation, the meticulously planned dinner. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. "Damn, little brother," he finally said, a note of awe in his voice. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" "You think I went too far?" I asked, the question a raw plea for validation. "I think Lorraine deserved what she got," he said firmly, his conviction a balm to my frayed nerves. "She wasn't just cheating. She was stealing and lying to everyone. What were you supposed to do? Have a quiet little chat and let her spin the story her way? You know she would have." His words reassured me. Rowan had always been my moral compass, the steady north to my sometimes wavering needle. The next morning, I woke to a loud, insistent pounding on the front door. My first thought was Lorraine. But when I opened the door, it was Alistair, her business partner, his face grim and tired. "We need to talk," he said, bypassing any pleasantries. "How did you know I was here?" I asked, running a hand through my sleep-mussed hair. "Lorraine thought you might be. She's in a bad way, Declan." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, my voice flat as I headed to the kitchen to make coffee. Alistair followed me, his presence filling the small space. "You don't understand. After you left last night, things got ugly." Griffin tried to explain himself, claimed the whole thing was a misunderstanding. Lorraine went ballistic. She completely lost it. She threw her drink in his face, started screaming about how he'd promised to leave his wife for her. This was news to me. I paused, the coffee scoop halfway to the machine. "Griffin's married?" Alistair nodded, a look of weary disgust on his face. "Apparently he reconciled with his ex-wife 6 months ago. He never told Lorraine. That's why he kept postponing their plans to go public." The coffee maker gurgled to life as I processed this new, sickening layer of deceit. So, she wasn't just the other woman. She was the other woman who didn't even know she was the other woman. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. She had torched our 15-year marriage for a man who was playing her as masterfully as she had been playing me. "Why are you telling me this, Alistair?" I asked, handing him a mug. "Because as her partner, I need to know how far you're planning to take this. The financial impropriety alone, it could destroy the agency if it becomes public. We have investors, other clients." "I'm not planning to go public," I said finally, surprising myself with the finality of the decision. "My issue is with Lorraine and Griffin, not with the agency." His relief was palpable. "Thank you. For what it's worth, we're placing Lorraine on immediate, indefinite administrative leave. And from what I hear, Griffin's company has already recalled him to Chicago. They're both facing significant professional consequences. The consequences continued to ripple outwards in the days that followed. My carefully orchestrated explosion had started a wildfire that I could no longer control. I soon learned that Lorraine would be forced to resign, her stake in the company bought out under contentious terms. Griffin was effectively demoted, a pariah in his own company. They had risked everything, and now they were losing everything. But the fire was starting to burn me too. Our social circle fractured. Friends took sides, offering awkward condolences or maintaining a diplomatic chilly distance. And then Lorraine began her counteroffensive. She didn't deny the affair, but she began to reframe the narrative. Friends of hers, women I had hosted in my own home, started posting vague statuses on social media about the dangers of narcissistic men and the horror of public humiliation as a form of emotional abuse. No names were mentioned, but anyone in our circle knew exactly who they were talking about. The final, crushing blow came from my own office. My boss, Richard, a man I respected, called me in for a private meeting. "Declan, I'll be blunt," he said, his gaze fixed on a point just over my shoulder. That scene at Aria has become something of a legend in certain circles, and not everyone appreciates the drama. Some of our more conservative clients are uncomfortable. They're requesting different agents. It was a demotion in all but name, a quiet shunting to the sidelines. "The perception right now," Richard continued, finally meeting my eyes with a look of genuine pity, "is that you're volatile." "Oh, volatile." For exposing my wife's affair and her theft. As I walked out of his office, I realized Boston had become a battlefield where I had already lost. Every interaction was loaded with subtext. Every professional setback was tied to the implosion of my marriage. It was time to concede this particular theater of war to Lorraine and whatever scorched earth tactics she chose to employ. That night, I called my brother. "Rowan," I said, looking out at the city lights that no longer felt like home, "I think I'll take you up on that offer to visit Seattle." It wasn't a vacation anymore. It was an escape. It was an exile. Landing at SeaTac felt like stepping into another world, or perhaps another version of my own life. The air was cleaner, scented with pine and rain, a stark contrast to the humid, history-laden air of Boston. The greens of the Pacific Northwest were a deep, vibrant emerald, a color so intense it felt cleansing. The city seemed to thrum with a kind of optimistic, forward-looking energy I hadn't realized was missing from my life. Rowan met me at the airport, bypassing any awkward questions and simply wrapping me in a bear hug that spoke more than words ever could. It was a hug that said, "You're safe here. You can let go." "Welcome to the rainy city," he said, taking my bag. "How are you holding up, for real?" "Better than expected," I admitted, and it was the truth. There's something strangely freeing about having your worst fear come true. Once the unthinkable has already happened, everything else seems manageable. Rowan lived in a stunning modern loft in Capitol Hill with his girlfriend Tara, a pediatric surgeon with a warm, intelligent smile and a no-nonsense attitude that I immediately liked. The place was all exposed brick and polished concrete floors, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of downtown Seattle and the glistening bay beyond. It felt like the future, a place unburdened by the past. The next morning, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the unfamiliar sound of light, easy laughter. I found Rowan in the kitchen with Tara and a striking woman with a cascade of dark curly hair and bright blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Deck, this is Sloan," Rowan said, his tone a little too casual to be believable. "She's the real estate agent I was telling you about." He hadn't mentioned any real estate agent, but I understood the game. I played along, extending my hand. "Declan Mitchell, nice to meet you." "Sloan Elliott," she replied, her handshake firm and confident. "Likewise. Rowan says you're in luxury properties in Boston. I'd love to pick your brain about the East Coast market sometime." Her smile was genuine, putting me instantly at ease. "Sure," I said, accepting a mug of coffee from Tara, though I'm technically on an extended vacation from all things real estate at the moment. "Understood," she smiled, her blue eyes twinkling. "But if you change your mind, I happen to be showing a stunning waterfront property on Lake Washington this afternoon that might interest you. Purely for comparative market research, of course." Her eyes held mine a beat longer than necessary, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. A simple, uncomplicated flicker of attraction. There was no history, no baggage, no expectations. just potential. Actually, I found myself saying, a ghost of my old self stirring within me, market research sounds perfect. No. 4 hours later, I was standing in a modernist masterpiece of glass and cedar, perched on the shores of Lake Washington, listening to Sloan detail its architectural features to a wealthy tech couple. She was brilliant, knowledgeable without being pushy, personable without a hint of phoniness. I found myself studying her technique as much as the property itself. After the clients left, promising to think about it, she turned to me, a playful glint in her eye. "So, how'd I do, Boston?" "Impressively," I admitted. "Though you might have emphasized the smart home integration more. Tech people love that stuff." She laughed. "Noted. Now, a proper debrief is in order. Over drinks. There's a great place nearby with a view of the lake." At a quiet bar, with the afternoon sun glittering on the water, conversation flowed more easily than it had with anyone in years. Sloan had moved to Seattle from San Francisco 5 years ago after her own divorce. "Married too young," she explained, swirling the wine in her glass. "We grew in different directions. The split was amicable, but it still felt like a monumental failure at the time." "I know that feeling," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Even though Lorraine's affair made the decision pretty clear-cut, there's still this profound sense that I failed at the most important relationship of my life. Sloan studied me with an empathetic gaze. "Rowan mentioned your situation. That sounds incredibly painful. A pretty dramatic exit strategy." I winced, the memory of the dinner at Arya still sharp. "Not my finest moment, I'll admit." "I don't know," she said thoughtfully, tapping her finger on her glass. "There's something to be said for bringing secrets into the light. When my ex and I split, we told everyone it was mutual and friendly, which was true as far as it went. But we didn't mention his emotional affair with his colleague, or my growing resentment that he'd given up on his dreams. Sometimes I wish we'd been more honest, if only with ourselves. All that politeness just felt like another kind of lie." Her candor was a breath of fresh air. For 15 years, my life with Lorraine had been an exercise in careful image management, in curating the perfect narrative. With Sloan, there was no pretense. Over the next 2 weeks, Seattle worked its magic on me. The city was a balm to my bruised soul. I joined Rowan for long, challenging hikes on nearby mountain trails, the physical exertion burning away my restless anger. I spent afternoons exploring the city's distinct neighborhoods, from the quirky charm of Fremont to the polished elegance of Queen Anne, and I met Sloan for coffee twice more. Each time was easier than the last. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly straightforward. There was an undeniable attraction between us, a simmering potential, but neither of us pushed it. We were both aware that my life was a chaotic construction site, but the possibility of what could be built there remained, a tantalizing glimpse of what life after Lorraine might look like. The end of my marriage wasn't just a loss. I was beginning to see it as an opportunity. It was a chance to rediscover who I was apart from Lorraine, to build a life that reflected my own desires and values, not our carefully curated joint identity. The idea of moving to this city, once a desperate escape, was starting to feel like a genuine, hopeful choice. A new horizon was waiting. Just as I was beginning to feel a sense of peace, a fragile new beginning taking root, the past reached out from Boston and tried to drag me back into the inferno. I was having breakfast with Rowan and Tara when my phone rang. It was Bernard, my lawyer. "Declan, we have a situation," he said, his voice grim and devoid of preamble. "Lorraine is threatening to file criminal charges. She's claiming you illegally hacked her phone to obtain the text messages you revealed at the restaurant." "That's ridiculous," I sputtered, coffee sloshing over the rim of my mug. "Her phone was unlocked. I saw the messages right there on the screen." "Oh. She's saying you used her fingerprint while she was sleeping to unlock it. She's calling it unauthorized access of personal data. It's her word against yours, and she's trying to paint you as an unstable, vindictive spouse." "This changes things," Rowan said grimly after I relayed the conversation, his face set in hard lines. "This isn't just a messy divorce anymore. If she's going on the offensive like this, you need to get back to Boston and deal with this head on." He was right. The sense of peace I'd found in Seattle evaporated with each eastward mile of the flight back. This was Lorraine's classic move: when cornered, attack, create chaos to distract from the truth. But this time, I wouldn't be drawn into a public spectacle. I wouldn't play her game. My lawyer and I called her bluff. We informed her lawyer in no uncertain terms that if she pursued these baseless and defamatory allegations, we would countersue. We would ensure that every detail of her affair and her documented financial misconduct became a permanent, searchable public record through a very messy, very public civil trial. It was a brutal but effective checkmate. Within days, she withdrew her claims. The hope of a dignified, respectful split was gone, utterly destroyed, but at least the war was almost over. My final meeting with Lorraine took place not in our home or a restaurant, but in the cold, sterile conference room at Bernard's office to sign the last of the preliminary divorce papers. She arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably in a navy suit that screamed professional competence, a shield of armor against the world. Her face was a carefully composed mask, showing nothing of the woman who had shared my bed and my life for 15 years. "Declan," she said with a stiff nod. "Lorraine," I replied, my voice even. "I hear you're moving to Seattle. News traveled fast." "Moving forward," I corrected gently. "There's nothing for me here anymore." She flinched, a barely perceptible tremor, the first crack in her composed facade. "You could have fought for us, you know," she said, her voice quiet, almost wistful. "Before all of this, if you had just paid attention, noticed I was unhappy." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice low but firm, cutting through her attempt at revisionist history. "Don't rewrite our story to make your affair my fault. You could have talked to me if you were unhappy. You chose deception. You chose Griffin." She looked away, her gaze falling to her designer handbag on the table between us. "You're right," she whispered, and the admission seemed to cost her dearly. "I made my choices, but so did you, Declan. You chose the most destructive path possible. You orchestrated a public execution." There was an uncomfortable truth in her words. I had chosen destruction over a private confrontation driven by a primal need to control the narrative, to ensure she couldn't spin the story. "Maybe we both chose destruction over healing," I said quietly, the anger finally gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "Maybe that says everything about why our marriage failed in the first place." "Oh." We signed the papers in silence, the scratch of pen on paper, the only sound in the room. As she stood to leave, she hesitated. "For what it's worth," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "I am sorry, Declan. Not just for the affair, but for everything that came after. The rumors, the allegations. It was petty. It was beneath both of us." "Thank you for saying that," I said, surprised by her candor. "I'm sorry too, for the public nature of it. You deserved a chance to explain yourself privately first." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Would you have listened?" "Probably not," I admitted. "I was too angry. And I was too defensive," she finished. "Goodbye, Declan. I hope Seattle brings you what you're looking for." As she walked out of my life, I felt a profound weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was a kind of closure. 2 days later, I boarded a one-way flight to Seattle with 2 suitcases and the keys to a new apartment. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of that apartment overlooking the sparkling expanse of Lake Union, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple over the distant Olympic Mountains. My phone rang. It was Rowan, his customary Sunday check-in. "How's it going, little brother?" "Good," I said, a genuine smile on my face. "Really good, actually. The Dixon property sold yesterday. Highest price per square foot in that neighborhood this year. Killing it professionally, as expected," he laughed. "And personally?" I glanced back through the glass door into the apartment, where Sloane was cooking dinner, her dark curls bouncing as she danced to music only she could hear through her earbuds. "Taking it slow," I said, "but heading in the right, very good direction." "Lorraine signed the final papers," Rowan said, his tone cautious. "Mom told me. It's official now." "I know," I said. "Bernard called yesterday." How do you feel?" I considered the question, watching the last rays of sunlight glitter on the water. "Free," I said finally, "like I can finally close that chapter completely. No regrets about how it all went down?" "Some," I admitted honestly. The restaurant scene wasn't my proudest moment. It was a reckless, painful thing to do. But I don't regret the truth coming out. Lorraine and I were living a lie long before her affair. We were business partners in a life we'd built for an audience. At least now we both have a chance at something real. "Deep thoughts from my formerly superficial brother," Rowan teased. I laughed. Maybe near-death experiences do that to people. Near death? That's what divorce felt like. The death of the future I thought I had. The death of the identity I'd built around being Lorraine's husband. But you survive. And on the other side, there's possibility. And Sloane caught my eye through the window and mouthed, "Dinner's ready." "I've got to go," I told Rowan. As I joined Sloane at the table, the Seattle skyline twinkling to life through the windows, she poured 2 glasses of Spanish wine. "To new chapters," she said, raising her glass, her blue eyes bright with affection. I clinked mine against hers. "To authentic lives." As we ate, I thought about the chaotic, painful journey that had brought me to this peaceful moment. The night I discovered Lorraine's affair had been the most destructive of my life. The public exposure at Aria, the most reckless thing I had ever done. But without that rupture, that complete demolition of the facade we'd built, I might never have found my way here. Sharing a simple, homemade meal with a woman who knew my flaws and my history and liked me anyway. A woman who valued honesty over appearance. "You're quiet tonight," Sloane observed, refilling my glass. "Regrets?" she asked gently, echoing Rowan's question. I looked at her brilliant, kind, honest Sloane, who had never pretended to be anything other than exactly who she was. The city of my new beginning glittered behind her. "Not a single one," I said, and I meant it with all my heart.